Um, hey, Noan, I wanted to have this conversation because you reached out and you're talking about rethinking education and building the new educational systems and what that looks like, and you've been experimenting with it and doing a lot of really cool stuff there. So I really just wanted to duck. Yeah, you know what? That's enough of an intro. I'll pass it right to you and let you take it from there.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been an educator most of my adult life, and always have come from a really hands-on applied side, and always felt like the system was working against educators like me. And what's amazing is the more I get to know educators, the more I find that I'm not the exception, but I'm kind of the rule. So educators know students, and they recognize that a lot of students' needs are not being met with our current system. So we've played with a lot of different structures and strategies. For 5 years at Green School in Bali, myself and some colleagues kind of built a mini school within a school, where we took kids out of their regular daily grind of going to one class and another, and just got them to focus as a projects-based learning group. Let's just go full on into what you guys are passionate about, what the community needs. And we found that we were starting to hit some really nice spaces there, because something that I always have felt is we think of schools as these resource black holes. You put money into a school and you're like, oh, in the future, these people will be helping. The reality is kids are like creative engines. They pump out so many ideas all the time, and we should be thinking of them as
good ideas.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, good, bad, everything in between. They have lower barriers about what needs to pass as an idea before they share it, and so that's just really powerful. And so I'm now in the process of working with a really progressive community who wants to reimagine education. And the founder of this community said, hey, just start tabula rasa. What would you do if you could start totally without any expectations of what the school looks like, without expectations of what we should organize? And so we've been going through that process for the last couple months, and a couple key pieces that keep on coming up are you need to have transparency across the organization, and you need to have agency at every level. So educators kind of do this already. Most educators I know, they come in with themselves, their philosophy of learning, and an approach. And then they jump into a system, and the system goes, you must fit into our mold. And what they do is, I would say most educators, they either quit because it's oppressive, or they learn to hack the system. What doesn't happen is they all conform to this beautiful structure that is, and live in a happier, more organized institutional world.
Or unfortunately, through a lot of educators I had, they get depressed and miserable and take it out on their students.
Good point. Yeah. I'm an optimist, so I'm hoping that those guys would have quit, but the reality is probably closer to what you're saying there. So really, with the idea of agency and transparency, this kind of started us realizing that, look, we can look towards models like deep democracy and sort of tribal structures, but there's tools now that give us these abilities to start thinking of radically transparent society, or radically transparent organizations. We can also think about how educators can create a huge amount of autonomy and be accountable to the kids they're teaching. And all of this has kind of led me down the path that, look, we need to create an amazing DAO to hold our educational structure in place.
I want to sell you on setting up a particular type of school. And so here's
Let's hear it.
In theory. All of this technology we're building is technology to design new types of civilizations. It's allowing us to be the architects of our own economies, our own governance systems, our own nation states. What replaces that? Like, we get to go, no, we're no longer just fish and water and the economy is just the way it is. We are now the engineers of what these systems look like. So like, what are we teaching students today? Is we're saying, all right, we're in a time of transition. This is the Renaissance. We could be enculturing you into the tools of the old system, which is no longer relevant across the board. Or we could be showing you the cutting edge tools that are coming on board right now that are allowing people to create new economies. And then the school is about, one, learning those tools, but then doing it within the community and the group. So like you said, instead of educational centers being a resource sink, they could be like startups where the school is about creating value, connecting with the community, solving problems, going about the process of deciding how to decide and then making decisions and moving forward. It's like, if that's just what we should be teaching kids. Like, let's just get super practical. Like, hey, we want to prepare you for the world. Well, the world is a world where you get to create new realities and provide value for humanity, enact your purpose, help others enact their purpose, and just be humanity. Like, what does it look like when we're creating a different type of civilization? It looks like, having systems that help us understand our purpose and then enact that and bring that to the world. And then what's the point of education systems if not just to help us along that process and journey? So let's just get really practical. Let's be doing that. So then the education itself is in setting up DAOs, helping students come into DAOs, make decisions together, evolve their DAO. Their DAO needs to be valuable and have value in the world. It's creating a token. Now we've created a game. They're like, hey, students, there's a global market of people who will literally pay you for their token if you can make it valuable. Great. And now they're into the crypto world, making tokens and trying to, find a way to make them valuable. And that's all part of like the learning journey. It's like, how to engage with the world and, use the tools to help them succeed. And then of course they're succeeding while doing it. So then school starts looking more like a startup, accelerator, incubator than this, oppressive institution that kids hate to go to.
Yeah. And like, for me, there needs to be accountability in school, but the accountability is coming from all the wrong spots right now. It's like, it's done by a central authority who then makes the teachers accountable to make the kids accountable. And each level of that loses meaning, for one. And then secondly, what ends up happening is it makes everybody in the system kind of venting on the next level below because they don't necessarily align in purpose. And so it actually breeds a bit of negative energy, for lack of a better word. And so I want the community, the school, because school is even a touchy word for me. It's too loaded in history. So our learning group, our learning community, I would like to see it one where there is accountability, but it's all about personal accountability. You feel personally responsible for your projects, for meeting with people at a given time. And it's because you've been given the latitude to know your needs and meet them, or know your needs and kind of identify. But then also, we continuously are giving people that sort of sense of agency where they're going, oh, okay, I'm meeting with Reiki right now because we made a meeting and it's my responsibility to show up. It's not because he's going to grade me on this, and if I don't show up, I'm going to fail a class.
Well, right.
Because,
and I think it's because we're connecting it to meaning. I assume you're having this meeting because it aligns with stuff you're trying to create in the world, and you're moving forward, and there's a reason why we're having this, and it makes sense. All I see students who aren't accountable, they don't see the meaning in it and the purpose. And then what I see is a free human who has free will and doesn't want to do stupid shit. I don't see this bad
Yeah.
child. It's like, no, that's just a human who's empowered and doesn't want to do your garbage because it makes no sense,
Yeah.
and you haven't inspired them. So for sure, I think we've completely ruined accountability. And one other thing I think would be, interesting to bring in to be accountable is, how are we as adults accountable? Well, we're accountable to the economic system. We're accountable to dollars in our bank account if we don't have enough of them or whatever. So we have different levels of accountability that society is accountable to. Society says you got to create value and represent it in dollars. And if you're doing that, then you can meet your needs, we really could do better than that system. And that's what SEEDS is all about.
100%.
But what you're saying is then if we start creating DAOs with students, then they start becoming accountable to external circumstances, either the community themselves that they're, relating with. And maybe that's a token price. Maybe they do create a token that represents their learning journey, and that token represents how much value they're creating in their community. And then that's what they're accountable to, is the token a healthy price or not, So that's instead of a grade where it's just like ABC, now you have a token price if you want something like that to look to.
Yeah.
And then we can get really clever and we can attach that token price to really meaningful metrics, such as, how much is that learning community regenerating the environment or regenerating the community and the social systems that they're in. And then we could track other behaviors, and that could also reflect in a token's price.
Yeah.
So we can have all these interesting ways of setting up learning groups and communities and students to have more meaningful metrics. And then it's attached to the student. And then they understand why, showing up to that meeting is important, and, developing that protocol on time is important, because there's deadlines that all the other groups are trying to meet to move things forward. So if they don't show up with their piece, then they're slowing everyone down. All of a sudden it makes sense. Now it's not Saturday as test day and I have to be ready because, teacher said so. Now it's everyone else is working on this and I'm accountable to them. And if I miss my spot, so we're learning by actually doing what we are doing in the world, rather than, sitting at a desk and just theorizing about it.
Yeah, that's
awesome. Me on it. This is great.
And there's one more piece, like when it comes to like a grade, as sort of like our traditional accountability system, there's a piece of it that never sat right, and that is there's no forgiving element. So a kid could be having a traumatic experience in their social life. A kid could be just going through puberty. There's so many reasons that personal grade can be impacted, and that feedback loop can actually have knock-on effects. So it can cause intensified sort of feelings. You're feeling down for some reason or other, your grades drop. It tells you, hey, you're a crappy human being, and that just doesn't feel right. Whereas let's use the example of sort of like the value of a token. There is a group sense to that. And to me, that's like also another piece that could be really powerful, is you move towards looking at your collective rather than you as an individual. And a collective is there to support one another. And I think school should be the place where you start that, because that's where you're imprinting behaviors that you want people to continue through life. Modeling is maybe a better word, because imprinting sounds too formulaic or
well, this is where I think it's less devious if we're accurate that it is imprinting. I mean, we're being created by the technologies we're interacting with. Technologies even being how we coordinate, like all of that is in fact creating us. Let's get real. But what's interesting is we are the creators of what's creating us, and then acknowledging that as well. So it's no longer like it's Facebook's engineers that are manipulating us. Now all of those systems are open and we get to see them, we get to understand them, and we get to re-engineer them. So that's another, part of the Renaissance that's happening here, is we are the designers of the tools that are designing us. So when we look at that protocol on Facebook and that algorithm that addicts us to, scrolling, we can actually say, hey, let's consciously consider this algorithm, and maybe we don't want to try to addict ourselves. Let's actually slow it down. Let's intentionally disrupt the feed every 15 minutes. So it encourages us to step away. And, let's re-engineer these protocols to build a better humanity, So that's really what it's about. And it's about helping students understand that we are gods. We are the creators of the tools that are creating us, rather than what university and education system does now, which says, this is tools as they exist. These are the facts. This is how they affect you. Just get with it. We design this whole psychology around, well, these tools are just the way life is, and this is how humans respond to those tools. And we teach ourselves that we're just, robots being interacted by, these systems. Anyway, so I think that's what we really, really can start doing in our education systems, is getting down to that idea that we are the creators.
Yeah.
And then start creating those systems real time, and starting with their education, right?
I've just
how you design your education system. So it kind of, one more thought, and then
go for it.
You're talking about the kid who's going through puberty and having a hard time, and maybe right now is not the best time to show up for his community and his schoolwork or whatever he's doing, right? So that's when we get to sit there and consciously sit down and be like, all right, this is a reality that we're dealing with. Maybe we bake into our protocols this idea that if you're feeling that way, you get to just take 3 months off or 6 months off and go on a spirit quest and go sit in nature, or whatever you need to do. Take some time to slow down and breathe and just go through puberty if that's what you're doing, or whatever it is. And then bake that right into the education learning journey. So he comes to his community and says, hey, I'm going through this journey, and life's telling me it'd be better for me right now if I spent way more time in the woods on my own than, with you guys. Let's build this into a protocol. Let's make space for this, because we get to design society to serve us, not just be served by these protocols, right? And then we can consciously discuss that. We could put up a governance proposal if we need to, and we can upgrade our protocols to then allow for that. And I'm sure a lot of people would appreciate that protocol, So it's about teaching students to go through this process, because we get to say, hey, humanity is going through a renaissance right now, and you guys get to decide what your civilization of the future looks like. What would you like it to be? Let's consciously design that. Let's literally build the tools to facilitate that. And then you're just there. And then the students who went through this learning journey at, 7 years old or whenever they started, it continues forever. And then they never have to leave that, space of just creating reality, And I think this is like kind of the way of onboarding into the Renaissance, is just we step into it and we say, this is our reality now, and we just let it be,
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, you and I have had to go through an immense amount of unlearning to start accepting these things. And that actually astounds me to imagine what it would be like if we didn't have to go through that unlearning process. Not saying we aren't going to unlearn. There's going to be that happening all the time. Sure. But there's a certain point here that, like, we've gone through a ridiculous amount of programming and deprogramming to get where we are. Whereas, like you said, that 7-year-old or 14-year-old who has that experience of being able to look out for their well-being and understand that, and be able to communicate their needs in a really authentic way and be heard, not just like, oh, that must be hard, but let's figure out your retreat. You said you just need a break. What kind of break? Look, there's these guys who are playing pirate.
Everything is up for renegotiation.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just think it's right there. You're looking at a radical acceleration of what's possible when these kids start moving out. And this is an interesting point, because so many of the reservations when I talk with parents about this is, but what about when my kid needs to go to university, or what next? What happens then? And I personally feel a deep confidence saying, man, your kid is going to be in so much better space for whatever happens next. If they want to go to university, they'll figure it out. If they want to start a business, they'll be ready for that. They will be in the right headspace for life, not just for admission to a university that might stress them out.
Totally. I mean, if it fully clicks that what we're doing is we're teaching you to be gods and creators of your reality, then none of the superficial questions matter. It's like, well, why do you want them to go to university? Because you want them to be taking care of themselves and to be able to provide for their family or whatever. It's like, okay, well, wouldn't it be better to be able to take care of yourself if you're a god and a creator of your reality and you can manifest systems the way that you would like them to be in the world? Like, well, that's like, those are the skills that we're teaching. So, I love that. Man, there's like 30 different ways that we could take this right now, but to ground this, there's one thing I wanted to say to you and to really honor your role, because you had mentioned what happened if we wouldn't have needed to go through this unlearning and how many years we had to spend unlearning and then relearning, right? But that was to prepare you for your role as a bridge builder from the one paradigm to the next. Why I think the students that are coming through right now, they're fully on the other side of the territory. So I've kind of relegated and realized my position and role isn't necessarily to build the new island we're going to. It was to build the bridge, understand kind of both sides, what's potentially possible, but what it really looks like. Those ideas are going to come through people who didn't have to unlearn all the rules of domination and capitalism and, competition and self-interest is good, blah, 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 and have to unlearn all that and then relearn what ecosystemic thinking means. And basically the stuff kids already know. Those minds are who's going to be the ones creating the protocols of the future civilizations. So I think our role that we can best serve isn't just making sure that foundation and that nest and, environment for them to be able to create from is there. And I think that's what these learning spaces are really about. It's just creating that environment and saying, great, here's the tools for creating new realities. Go. You're God now. What can you do? And see what happens.
Super exciting. I hear you there. And I love the idea of actually, incidentally, I work at a place called The Bridge, and it's an interesting, simple idea, but Green School has a co-working space on campus. And just that single essence of saying we're all learners, adults are learners too, and connecting kids to adults on campus already has pretty profound effects. And that's still in a traditional system. But again, The Bridge, it's a biggie. So thanks for bringing that up.
A pleasure. And I have another idea is these learning centers where if we're setting up companies and organizations now, great. And then they're creating products, awesome. And then they're just marketing it to their own age group. Like they know how to make the videos on TikTok. They know how to communicate with that audience. They know how to go viral in that world. Like if you even want to look at it in the purest capitalistic sense, there's a whole untapped market of teenage workers to exploit, But simultaneously, there's a whole movement of creators and game changers that could be inspired and to learn about these new tools. So part of these learning journeys is the students are coming together to share their story, build tools that are going to empower other students to be able to exit the systems that are no longer serving them, and be able to step out. And even if they have to take their nights and weekends at first before they can convince their parents that there's a better learning journey for them to have. But we're actually, reaching out and helping other students kind of break out of the old system as well. So that's part of the learning journey, is we say, look, we have a purpose to bring to the world, and that's to serve this movement and to help other students become inspired too, to go on their own learning journey and to be able to tap into their own potential. Like, how can we best help them? And that could be the overall general question that we're asking a lot of these learning journeys, is like, how do we serve humanity and serve each other, and how can we do that? Maybe it looks like building tools and putting together, stories together and making a documentary. Like there's a million different ways that groups can, explore that question. And that could be part of their learning journey.
I just finished a class and it had its faults, but the premise of the class was human-centered design. And it was just guiding kids through a process of learning how to move from an observation about their community into a design question and then solutions and then creating an identity around that. And we didn't have a lot of time, but within a group of 12 kids, first of all, there was a huge diversity in ideas. I mean, we had one kid who wanted to find a way to reinvigorate the tradition of artisanal knife building, because that's where his passion lies. And he's like, oh, there's so much of this happening here, but it's lost because there's no sort of like community of people around that. Another group went through and said, look, youth culture here is segregated. All the ex-international kids hang out together, all the Balinese kids hang out together. How do we make them start hanging out together? And one talked about, two different groups brought this up. One decided maybe we create sort of sport leagues that really focus on that community piece. And the other ones are like, we got to create like our own Vice Media type thing. They had a name for it. And already I'm like, I'm an adult and I would be interested in what they're doing. And then like a third group of kids were like, hey, here's problems in our school. And the ones like, kids aren't drinking enough because we don't have cool water fountains. And so she created a campaign around what she called hydrating. So another kid said, look, we are a progressive school, but we can work on more gender issues. And so she's actually presented to the governing council of the school about how to eliminate binary gender bathrooms, how we can sort of celebrate non-binary. And I mean, these are 16-year-old kids. And I just think to myself, like, with every single one of them, I've brought them this far on their journey. And the next step, like under a school of true agency and a system that actually they understand can support them, those ideas can run wild. So it's there, it just needs to be tapped.
And then I'm so interested in the potential of new education journeys right now too, because of the internet and what that's opened up, which has, it's unbounded it. A student can learn literally anything. There's, I think it's even like Harvard and a ton of the major schools too are putting tons of their courses online anyway. So it's unbounded what they could achieve. Like if they want to learn developing at 13 years old, because that's what they're encouraged by, they can. And there's all the resources out there to support them on that journey, right? So then that's what's really cool too, is when you start asking the questions you guys are at. And I love green school. Like it's one of the big reasons that pulled us to Bali too, just by the way.
Cool.
Anyway, I was just basically all I was going to do is mirror back what you're saying is awesome.
Well, there's something there though, which is because you've got unbounded resources for content. It begs the question, why have schools still got content-based objectives? Like, why do you need to learn X amount of science and whatnot when we live in a world where access to content is no longer an issue? You can get the content.
So there's a really incredible book. I forgot what it's called, but it goes in and it empirically kind of proves and demonstrates why schools set up. And what it's set up to do is not, teach us how to learn and be smart. Sure, that's kind of like a fine side effect. But the main thing was to teach authority. And where the school system actually came from. It was more about the command and control, who's in control, like the information and how that flows to where there's a central point of knowing, and everything else that comes from that source. Like in our culture, since we all went through the indoctrination, like we just think this is the way it is. But before this, there was a whole lot of unruling free people and natives and all these things that needed to be taught, so the school system was really designed to manufacture consent, if it were, and to teach us how to take orders, because the human spirit doesn't take orders. Like you couldn't govern and tell, humans and free humans what to do. They're just like, why? I'm a free human. I don't need to listen to you. That, complacency needed to be taught. So that was the main reason education centers were set up. And why not also, teach people stuff too? It was kind of like a side effect, but then it was like, oh, well, let's actually prepare people for manufacturing jobs. And then they were just designed for the industrial age. So that's kind of why, schools, I think, have been, stuck, even though education and how to learn has been, orders of magnitude improved and a way of doing it way better than how we do it. But that's not the point that they exist for. So that's why I don't think they've even remotely tried to keep up, which is also all the more reason why it's important to step out of those institutions, because they're keeping us stuck. They're, devolving humanity right now rather than supporting our evolution.
I so hear that. I believe probably some of the books you've read are from John Gatto, who writes a lot about that more nefarious side to schooling. But something that really struck me was there's a book from the 60s, I think it's the 60s, might be the 70s, but it's called Teaching as a Subversive Activity. And it was written back then and still stands true today, and is just, it to me feels like, oh, we lost opportunities, because this is public discourse 50 years ago. And some of the things is like, we need to teach kids how to be crap detectors. And it's like, what kind of world would we live in if this actually was part of what school taught us, was how to recognize bullshit? Because now we're saturated with it and we're suffering the consequences. Propaganda's everywhere, and we have zero skill to taught skill. I think a lot of us develop them through our culture, but zero sort of taught skill about, hey, that's bullshit. I gotta call that one.
Well, and there is actually the exact opposite that's being taught, that there's a source of truth and that truth comes from that. You can align to that truth by 99%, 95%. We literally say how close to truth you are. And if you're not, you're wrong. It's not up for debate. It's right and wrong, and here's the X and it's not. We teach that. So not only are we not teaching how to detect bullshit, we're teaching how to be compliant and to accept bullshit to begin with, which again was by design. So it's obvious that we've come into this mess where everyone's dumb and we can't trust people to govern themselves and all these fake stories that we tell each other. And it's because our system is literally trying to teach that. But the human spirit is so strong that it's not capable of completely doing that to us. So it's really easy that when we create the conditions for the human spirit to, pull out again and for us to be gods and creators again, it happens really quickly. And that's what we're kind of seeing in the Web3 space, kind of almost by accident, or people are stepping into that power and being able to create and being like, wow, this is powerful and kind of never ending. And then groups are just doing that and just exiting. And it's really cool kind of seeing that exodus take place right now. But yeah, I think we have to just, not have to, and we have an opportunity to get much more practical about creating those learning journeys and bringing people into that environment and helping us along that, transition journey. Because a lot of people too are also showing up into this whole, Renaissance space being like, I get it, I understand it, I know we need to change, but I have no idea what's going on here and I need to learn together. So it would be really powerful as we're taking those adults of all ages, all different generations, and pairing them with the students who are on this learning journey together. And the students are maybe the ones holding the container because they have more time, they have more time throughout the day to, manage the discords, welcome people in, hold people's hands and all that stuff. And then higher ups are coming to them and learning from them, which is then really helping flip the paradigm, that it's not like there's the learned at the top and age and blah, blah, blah. And they're going to teach you. Now, all of a sudden, we have the students that are sitting there teaching people of all generations, ages, and types, what's going on in this new world. And we really help, flip the narrative that we're creators, we're gods. We have things we know too. We can tap into truth too, and let them know that they can understand things as well. And we all have a direct access to, truth and that source of understanding. And it doesn't need to be mediated through a book or through a teacher. So I think that's what really, would be powerful in this Renaissance, is understanding that. And then just, very practically creating the spaces for
it. It's exciting stuff. It's exciting. It takes up so much of the day-to-day effort right now. Is a full-on time, because there is kind of having a foot in both ponds is a challenge. Making money that's still accepted to feed my family is part of what I need to do, and imagining a future where that isn't anybody's obligation is the second part of what I'm excited to do.
Well, maybe less imagining and more practically putting together an action plan to get there, and then using our education resources to get us there, right?
Yes, yeah. And actually, that interestingly, Green School has a Green Educator course that I'm designing a whole wide range of micro learning pieces for, and the plan of that is to help educators build more wall-less learning environments. And if we were to talk about a transition from A to Z, these are steps like B through G that you would be looking at. However, it's still important to start shifting some of that mainstream narrative to just open up more and more perspective on what could be possible.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of room for the, B's through G's of the world. But I feel like that gives too much energy. And then we make incremental changes, which actually keeps us in the same old paradigm. It gets stuck in revolution thinking, which is, where does revolution come from? It's right in the name. It's evolving. Same thing, different octave, it's like, and that's where I think we need to step out of. And it's even the framework, we'll change it from within, that's not actually how change happens. That's how you stay stuck. But, when you go through paradigm shifts, like a baby being born in the womb, it's not like, I'm going to take a little while. I'm going to, step out this week and inch it. It's like, no, it spends 9 months there, birth happens, paradigm shifts, and you're into a new state. And it's just fundamentally different. And I think if we try to move slowly, then we're going to have a stillbirth, or we don't do anything at all, which is what's happened the last, several decades. For a long time, we've known we've been heading in the wrong direction, and we've been trying to change it from within. And if you look at every chart that matters, zero impact, or nothing's changing. So if you get practical, be like, actually incremental change, like there's fine. It's for people who aren't ready there. But, fundamental change happens just by stepping into the new paradigm and making the old one obsolete. It's a full transition, and it's letting go of all the cuffs of what's possible, because then we're hobbling ourselves, because we're having to think of, what's possible if we're changing from one system to the next, rather than what do we just need that's going to be better. Even very practical people, point out the whole Tesla, and they've redesigned the car from the ground up and just rethought it. And they applaud that effort. They're like, that's exactly what we needed, because the whole other system was broken. We just had to, from scratch, rethink from the ground up and design a new system. That's what we just need to do on all the systems, from the economies, organization, education on up. Is just say, nope, this is the best system to serve us as best as we can imagine. And let's just step into that. Let's not limit ourselves on, what's going to be accepted, because what's accepted is what's best serving to us. So if we could design something that's just fundamentally better, people will accept it because it's just fundamentally better. We don't have to, design this narrative that they need some type of bridge, because if we truly design it to be better for us, then that bridge is unnecessary.
Yeah, thanks.
So I think it is a shift in thinking.
That's it kind of helps me process one of my own sort of reluctances because I am doing this Green Educator course piece as it's the job that puts food on the table, all that, but I'm reluctant to commit full time to that. And I think you just nailed it, because it is too much in that incremental change space. And so I work part-time with that just to meet the realities of today. But then the other half time is really looking at how to build a better tomorrow. And until recently, everybody gets super excited, and it isn't like anybody has given a compelling means to transition towards that as 100% of what I do. But that's my hope, is to get there. So that was super helpful, getting that understanding.
I have a inkling of a feeling that a lot of parents, I would be one of them in enough years, would be willing to pay to have their kids come and join a new learning journey that's teaching them about Web3 and the future tools and how to best be prepared for that. And if presented in the right way, is saying our school is about teaching your kid how to be a god and creator and a manifester of their reality. And we're going to teach them very practically how to build tools and build value for the world. Do you want your student to be part of this course? I'm sure you can get enough funding to support you to hold space for that. Because imagine it would only take like 30 students in order to really make it worth your while. So to me, I feel like that could probably get filled up super quick.
Okay,
and
that's
have a lot of demand.
Good to think about. Yeah, it's such a interesting one, because what I'm imagining in Bali, there's already a lot of independently educated kids, and one of the things we're trying to help them with is to create what we call a sovereign learner record. So the idea is you are totally in control of your own learning, but we want to help you build an understanding of what your learning journey looks like, and we want it to be 100% owned by you, but something that other groups can feed into. And so we're working away on that, not trying to actually create a school or a single space that allows for that to happen, but allows for a distributed learning ecosystem to exist, where they go on a trip for 3 days up into the mountains, and that's learning, and then they go roller skating on Thursdays, and that's learning, and they meet virtual tutors, and that's learning, and all those people can contribute to building a cohesive learning journey for the kids, so they don't have to do that piece of work exclusively themselves.
Absolutely love that. One more module you can have is their governance module. They get together and they're playing with the DAO and setting up roles for themselves in their little community and learning journey, issuing badges for different achievements to each other, designing badges and giving them different rights and powers to do certain things. And I think if the students start playing it and building the tools, I hope it starts looking more like a game. Like the massive multiplayer online role-playing games, like where you have different, shields and things, or for different badges.
Totally.
Because then that is what moves into building in the new corporation tools. Like, because at the end of the day, it's about coordination. And if you really think, what are kids doing on those massive multi-line online role-playing games?
Like, coordination.
Massive coordination. They're like organizing quests to do certain tasks. It's like, this is all we're doing in our startup and business world. They're doing right here and doing it way better than we're doing in business. Like, they're way better at coordinating and they're having fun doing it. And then we created this concept of work. So then if we really keep this going, then they can just play throughout their whole learning journey, but then play turns into creating value for the world too, because it's sitting there doing the real-time coordination and efforts that a lot of our companies and businesses are doing, but it's just doing it with way more fun-looking tools that are more enjoyable to play,
Yeah, I totally hear that, and I love. I'm a big fan of badging and working on sort of, because I do feel like a lot of people are like, what goals should I achieve? And if the goals are co-designed and help to unlock future potential, kind of, there's a level of gamification that I feel is pretty awesome to use. There's competitive pieces to gamification that I also personally feel a bit like that might move them away from a more deeper intrinsic motivation, but have to acknowledge that too. Sometimes the points count just for just being points and getting you motivated.
Well, and again, I want to circle back to, if we're designing those systems, then we get to be aware of how they're affecting us, and all that is part of our learning journey, like understanding they're affecting us in certain ways, and we get to tweak them, and then it becomes more intrinsically motivated, kind of by this weird, reverse way, that since we're intrinsically motivated to create these new systems that are extrinsically motivating us, it's like, then we've somehow kind of hacked it. At least that's how I've been looking at it lately. It's like, well, when we are designing incentive systems, but we're the ones designing it for ourselves, then it's not as manipulative or evil. So it's kind of nice to remember that it's not. And and we need to have that framing too. And I guarantee we'll design systems differently if, when we're designing our gamification systems, it's not, how do I convince others to do something? It's, how would I like to be convinced to do something, Do I keep track of how many reps I did at a gym because I enjoy it? Sure, sometimes I do that. It's my own little system. Yeah, I'll keep score, because it's my own motivation metric. Well, cool, that's something I like. So maybe this is what we do in our economy. We keep score because we like to, because it's like a metric of how we're improving. But we start to think of the systems differently that way, of how would I like to be incentivized, rather than how do I control others to do something,
Love that.
Because we realize that we are being impacted by the systems, Yeah,
that's I think a big piece of the puzzle is, moving away from, here I am, old school mentality, incentive systems are bad just because I see them being used as tools of manipulation.
And they are, they're abusing us. So in a lot of ways they are bad, and I get that. But we've got to move beyond that paradigm to understand.
But they do serve a purpose, and they do get people motivated. And so if you're fully aware of that, that could be really powerful. I like that a lot.
Well, so this is what I'm advocating, is for the learning journey, is to teach students that by bringing them into a DAO where they are now entering into an economy between themselves, where they are the designer of the rules. And that's the general sandbox. And then the goal, again, is always, how can we best serve humanities? Our purpose and the purpose we want to manifest in the world, and how can that best serve our community in this global transition? So we kind of set the stage for the container, and then we just bring everyone together of all different ages that show up on this learning journey, with kind of a focus on replacing, middle education from, early teens on. And then we let them go through the process of understanding that we aren't enacted on by systems. Because at that 13, 14, 15 years old age, when we're entering into systems and we're starting to be rebellious, what's happening is that kids are understanding that, hold on, these systems are just systems. Like, I don't have to listen to them. And at that moment is when we want to grab them up, and say, you're right, you are a god. Let's not start damaging you for the next 10 years and help you forget that. Like, this is the moment to not destroy you, which subsequently is the exact moment that a lot of parents are looking for a solution to a problem.
Send them to boarding school.
Of a rebellious teenager. And this is when we get to show up and say, hey, you have a problem, a rebellious teenager. We
need that.
We've taken all these rebellious teenagers, and now look how effective and productive they are. So we can use really game A thinking to, sell parents on it. But then what we're really doing is just giving them permission to free their child, and then we can welcome them into a place and, save a lot of humans that way.
Awesome.
So that's kind of what I think I would love to set up with you, is that container, that narrative, and where we can take it. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm game. To me, one of the biggest parts in all of this is moving beyond the ego, moving beyond the competitive sort of mindset to, let's bring on as many collaborators and see what happens, because eventually some people are going to take something and make good use of it, and it might not be me, it might not be you, it might be Joe who joins the group 10 weeks from now and brings it into a totally different environment we never expect. But keeping that collaboration and openness there allows for that possibility to happen, and the ideas don't just become this little pool of festering. So yes, let's do some stuff.
Ooh, yeah, that's one thing that I've personally loved, is the sense of freedom and relaxation that comes from not worrying about competing anymore. And here's why I don't worry about competing anymore. It's because the game I'm playing is designing a regenerative civilization. And under that context, everyone's winning, life's incredible, and we have more diversity and abundance, and we're all empowered to pursue our purpose. Okay, I'm a huge winner. If anyone else gets there before me, thank you. You know, that's great. Like, there's no competition here, because if one of us wins,
you win regardless. Yeah.
So once I've like fully like really embodied that, it's like, everything's open source. Can I help you? Yes, let me help you. Like, here's ideas. There's no sense of like, sign an NDA before we talk to you. Like, that entire paradigm is just so broken that there's not even worth spending any moments of time in. It's just a fully collaborative. We're on this together. If anyone wins, we all win. You know, we're just on this journey of transformation together. What's the most effective, fun, and joyful, if we can, way of going about this, you know? And then I love that space, and everything that's been coming from that area is just so much more generative and meaningful. And then I also fully believe that everything we're creating in the capitalistic, I'm making this to serve a market mindset, every product, everything that's designed and built and engineered, it's just garbage. The housing looks terrible. The products fall apart really easily. Like, things are uninspired. The art's boring and repetitive. It's like, what did we do? You know, we didn't create this really beautiful civilization. We just created something that was boring and remote. And they're like, ugh. So I think if we just completely think about like, how do we build a beautiful world? What's the most effective way of doing that? Then how do we build economic systems that support that? And all of a sudden it's, how do we tap into our purpose and our real passion? Because what people are really passionate about, if they're doing that, that's going to be the most important and beautiful thing for the world. So if we're teaching kids like how to show up for humanity, it's like, well, we've got to start with, what are you super passionate about? What are you inspired about? What keeps you up at night? Like, whatever that is, let's empower that. Let's embody that. Let's, you know, help cultivate that gift and bring it out even fuller and more express it. And then our entire learning journey is about finding out what that is, and then how it relates to everyone else and the grander image of systems change. And then that's the entire point of education, is then going through this learning journey of, who am I? What do I want to bring to the world? What's going to fulfill me? How can I show up with my community and best serve my community? Like, and then we're just on that journey, and then that journey doesn't end, and then that's life. And I think that would be a really beautiful way to, again, take all the kids that are, you know, broken and rebellious, and give them this way of just exiting and stepping into a new world, you know?
Awesome. Let's do it, man. I'm sold. And I guess next steps, probably I can guide you through some of our brainstorming and documentation for, I mean, essentially, we're very fortunate. A fellow who's building this pretty visionary community just said, hey, go for it. And he's given us permission and enough money to make it so that we can carve out the time at this point to build this plan. It's not a long, well, actually, the project, we have 3 months to create this vision, at which point it'll go into a next stage. And the contract we wrote up has all of this as open source. So at the moment, I'm just sharing a Google document around, but it would be great to figure out new ways to engage and get deeper participation from more people. So this is something that I could well imagine you've got a bit of experience in.
Yeah. maybe what we can do is we have a follow-up call where we talk about turning that itself into a DAO. And
Yeah,
it's very meta. It's the same process, but then applying that for everyone who wants to collaborate to make this space. And then how you guys go about that process. We could talk about the token, contribution accounting, the initial structures for what a governance container might look like. So we can go over the basic organization design and setting up this container or inviting people into, because that's, you know, if we really get down to it, and what this learning journey really is about is playing new games. You can imagine that if one person, the two people sat down at a table, one person thought they were playing Go Fish and the other one thought they were playing Monopoly, like
doesn't work too well.
Time, right? But the point is, it doesn't matter what game is being played. It's just that everyone knows what game it is, and we're all playing it at the same time. So it's really about like setting the initial container for that game. Humans know how to play games. We love reading rules. It's a really simple process, but then it's just creating up organization structures and say, okay, here's the original game. Here's the first roles. These are the first policies. This is how we decide, you know, here's the first conflict resolution protocol, whatever. Here's the initial game. Here's our purpose. Invite people in. And then of course the game itself is the game of creating the game. And that's
pretty
where
cool.
the game comes from. So
you know what? It's so funny because right now I like playing games, and actually one of my claims to fame is I've done huge social engineering with kids, where I should say not social engineering, social experimentation and
engineering. Again, be explicit and honest.
Well, I guess we do engineer structures, but so one of them is called the New States of Atlantis, and I have a game. I played this with middle schoolers. Everybody gets a piece of land on this. Atlantis came back up from the Atlantic Ocean, and we got the land, and we go through community development. And actually, I played this back in 2014 with kids, and we used Dogecoin, bought something like 30,000 Doge for $50 or something, and gave the kids coins, and we used crypto wallets to do all of our exchanges. After that, I played another game which was called Utopia Dystopia, and this one was where you have a central authority, and so each teacher became the ultimate authority, and we played a different game with the same kids where they were removed from the decision-making side and manipulated, and then the third year we played another one called Mars Bound, and in that we kind of hybridized. We had the kids got to select into two camps. One was the anarchists, which I got to control, and the other was the transnational lackeys, for lack of a better word. And we both had to build colonies on Mars based on learning about science. So we really upped the game there. Kids loved it. And then when you mentioned there that
so I want to build templates for all three of those so that learners across the globe can play this game, and then have an actual DAO that has all the roles, all the things all set up to step in and do this. Yeah,
we could do that. I've got really good documentation on all three of those. Right now, the newest game is all about creating a game. So it's called the Spirits of Gaia. Designed for Ubud, and everybody develops these animal personas that they take on. Biology lesson about learning about your local fauna there, and then they go on adventures, and the adventures are actually, that's the game is designing the adventures. So after you learn how to play, it's like, now create an adventure. You become the game master, you become the god. You design the parameters, you design the context, and invite other adventurers along. And I played it with kids as young as 6 in a school setting, and they loved it. And we moved away from this idea of I'm playing this game to win, to I'm playing this game because the story is awesome. And so it was really about the story that came out of it. And so, yeah, let's play with those. I'm happy to share all that. It's all open source, of course. So let's do it.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So when the multi-tenant do launches, we'll launch a do for each one of these.
Yeah. Nice.
All right. Well, my wife just came in and told me dinner's ready. So
I have a meeting with some friends for breakfast, so we're both time bound. But thanks for the meeting, and I have a feeling we'll talk again.
Oh, very soon. Cheers, brother.
Would you mind sending me a copy of that recording, by the way? I'd love to share it with my crew on this side.
Will do. Cheers, brother.
Awesome.
Sampai
Sampai jumpa.
jumpa.